Welcome to the November edition of the Austin Software Cooperatives Meetups. We are doing part 4 of Companies We Keep, Employee Ownership, and the Business Community in Place by John Abrams. We're going to be going through a mind map that we prepare normally. So here we go. We're going to go to chapter 6, chapter 7, maybe a little bit of chapter 8. Let's get this thing going. Let me know if you start hearing an echo. Right here. Oh. So, celebrating the spirit of craft.
Yeah, definitely an echo right now.
Oh, there is one. Let me move this over here. All right. You still hear an echo?
No, seems it's good now.
It's good. Okay. All right. I got that. I got that one for a backup just in case something weird happens. I could switch over. Um, so let's see and let me know if the echo starts. So here we go. Celebrating the spirit of craft. Yeah, it should be good now. Uh, so maybe a little bit of a review, but the cooperative, John Abrams Cooperative, they have a set of principles. This is the one of the principles. I think I want to say it's number 6. It might be number 5, or actually number 6. So making things are central to the enterprise, and they took the master builder approach. So uh, there was a couple books that we reviewed previously that really overlap this book really well. I think one of them is the Kropotkin book, Mutual Aid, and the other one is Medieval Guilds. And they take the stance that uh, a strong stance that things can be built from the bottom up, and in fact, a you maybe even a majority of things that are beautiful and that required a lot of architectural um, kind of foresight and brain power were built from the bottom up. This master builder approach, it starts out as kind of like an argument. It sounds like, oh, it's going to be from the top down, but he makes an argument that it isn't really a master, like the master is everyone kind of thing. And so they take the argument that it's kind of how I interpreted it. It was from the bottom up. Again, why is this important? You can kind of probably think of an employee owned entity. One of the points of friction are going to be, how do you make decisions? And then when it is a type of project that requires design, then there's kind of a built-in argument against it. Designed by committee has negative connotations. I mean, myself having worked with designers for doing development, they really dislike design by committee. There's some pushback in there with certain design companies, but for the most part, they don't like it. So, how do you solve that problem? This is a fundamental problem of uh, kind of democratic groups where they want to create something that's going to require craftsmanship. So, let's go back. Master builder approach. What is that? Master builder approach assigns responsibility for all aspects and trades to one entity, right? This one entity thing is where you could think, oh, this is going to be hierarchical and top down. Unlike today's conventional method, which fragments responsibilities into a process that some have called a relay race approach. So, the master builder approach, a master builder who guides and oversees the planning, design, and construction and has direct accountability to the owner can lead an effective process. In our case, this is not a single person, but a whole company. So this right here just throws it on its head. So that there, it's kind of like, oh, it's almost like a bait and switch. You call it a master builder, but it's not a single person, right? So South Mountain is the master builder, or more accurately, the whole South Mountain team is a master collaborator. As master builder, we hold the conviction that design and construction go hand in hand. The master builder system is uh, predicated on understanding that sites and buildings are layered, they develop over time and need care, adjustment, and continuous knowledge. The work is never done. The relay race approach postulates that an architect will develop a miraculous concept. Others will turn this wonderful vision into reality. And when it's done, it's over. And it sits on display like a sculpture for its lifetime, which sometimes is surprisingly short. So this takes the opposite view of really what I would say a master builder, which is the top down. That's kind of the connotation. It's really kind of a bottom up and a collection of things that work. So, as a review, we read and reviewed a book, Medieval Guilds. Again, the Kropotkin book on mutual aid. It talks a lot about bottom up structures like Florence or, other well developed cities that were not commissioned by a king or top down. They were built by the guilds or the groups, the workmen, the craftsmen from the bottom up, and they were trying to demonstrate their skill was uh, the motivation. So get ahead of ourselves. There, they were building things like cathedral builders. This author here was referring to cathedral builders, but they didn't actually, uh, do some references to some of the books like Medieval Guild. But he was correct. They really developed things from the bottom up, and some of I would say if you do a review of the architecture of the cities that were built in Europe from maybe the 1400s to the 1800s, they were built from the bottom up by guilds and groups, not from the top down with a someone who commissioned a thing and said this is what it's going to look like and it's going to be an architect and all this stuff like that. So far I'm going to stop there. Do you see anything here that seems controversial or you want to comment on?
Well, to me, there's an idea in the back of my head that is kind of flares up with this, which is how there's this thing of alienating the people that work on a particular effort from the more strategic decisions, or the design decisions, right? And so I know that traditionally what we try to do is like, well, as someone that in fact oversees the project, or the project was commissioned to me, then there's this thing of, well, there's an incentive for me to try to get the people that I'm going to hire, as little involved with the design discussion with a particular, let's call it client, right? So there are incentives for people to do that, right? One can be the suspicion of somebody who might have like a lot of knowledge, in fact, to gatekeep that from people, because maybe they fear that they're gonna be replaced, or their power with respect to others that follow and are hired under them, they might feel that they can take that knowledge and start their own thing, right? Or might start challenging them, right? So in my mind, it's like, in what ways does an effort, how is the power distributed? And now, what are the little things that came about just as a way to allow the power nodes in that effort to alienate people under them, right? And also perpetuate the idea that, no, you guys are builders. You are like peons, right? I'm the guy that knows about this. While, that doesn't have to be the case. And in fact, if knowledge was freely distributed, right, because there was not that incentive, we might see a lot of more collaboration in all of these efforts. But of course, even historically, yeah, there's usually like the guy with the capital that comes in and just hires someone. So, and yeah, again, they're incentivized to do otherwise. But in my mind, it's just an idea. It's like, oh, interesting. What if we didn't have to worry about any of that, and we could just freely figure out what's the best way to go about this,
Yeah. Some of what they wrestle with is how the person that's paying you, how you involve them in the process, but you're kind of the expert, but
Yeah.
they're kind of like, so they wrestle with that. I mean, you're building a house for somebody,
Yeah, that's
and
the consultative process.
yeah,
Yeah, that's consulting, that's like a big deal, something that is taken very, very seriously. Yeah, because it's such a big factor in how successful a project is going to go. And in fact, a lot of these big firms, turning into agile is also because it's a great way to involve the clients, not only in the just feedback, like shorter cycles, but also involve them, in some of the discussions. Have a Scrum team that has like maybe one or two business users, and they're in there, and anyway, so yeah, that's definitely a big deal, the consultative process. And in fact, a designer, I'm also I started as an industrial designer, so I understand how important it is to be close to whoever is not only from a client standpoint, but just from a user standpoint, right? How those interactions and building that relationship is so important as you go down this path, which does not involve only just arriving to some sort of like what do you call it, like a draft or whatever. What do you call it now? You call it something else in English, but all the way to the
a
production.
blueprint.
Yeah, blueprint. That's the way. Yeah. Not only just to the blueprint and you just pass it over the fence, no. But no, you're actually involved in all the process. Perhaps, obviously, in a different capacity, but making sure that there's no that like very waterfall like, because what happens is in the end, you're not solving the problem. The client is not happy. The users are not happy. And yeah.
Yeah.
super long
Okay.
rant. I'm sorry, Watson.
No,
Sometimes
no,
I just
no.
go. It was a very simple idea. It's like, yeah, the consultative process. Yeah, in consulting, designers, they. I'm sorry.
We have a review of a book. I remember it had a horrible name and it was maybe 3 years ago. But I mean like a cringy name, I should say. It was something like The $1 Million Consultant. And that guy that writes that book, he has like many, many books. But um it talks about wrestling what you were with what you're saying. And the one of the um I would say premise of the book, findings of the book, it was that they were saying you do need to, I guess the answer is in the client. The answer
Mm,
is in uh somewhere inside of like you're going through and you're doing interviews and it could be a municipality, it could be an actual company or whatever. Someone within there has been wrestling with the problem already, and then your job is really to pull it out, some form of it, and bring it up to the um like to the executives or what have you. The more often than not, that's really what ends up happening, and then you get buy-in on the way to do while you're doing that. So it could be, a famous book is The Innovator's Dilemma.
mm,
You've got uh people where they're basically really almost controlled by the customer. The customer, with the one that has the money, they're like, hey, if you're a good manager, you're going to do what the customer says. And they're basically, customers want more of the same of what they already had. And so that's not innovation. So that's the innovator's dilemma. This kind of thing, it cracks, busts through the innovator's dilemma. You have people that have great ideas and all that. The people that are like, yeah, the managers want this, but we know that they're silly because really we all know that this other thing will work. And you kind of bring that forward, make it more explicit, and then say, how about this? And then you kind of have buy-in because a lot of the populace may already believe in it.
mhm.
But that was like a really good Innovator's Dilemma. Design Justice, also a book we reviewed, is
Design justice. Wow.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, man. I'm
Interesting.
sitting here thinking you sat through all these. So Design Justice was another book we reviewed. Very much the argument in there is that design is actually done by power users, um, and in conjunction with the whoever, whether it be developers or what have you. And then oftentimes they're not attributed to the design. Of one of the examples was Twitter. Like Twitter wasn't made by Jack. Well, I forget his net last name, but the guy that we all think made Twitter. Even me being originally in the Ruby community back when they were working and posting about Twitter when it was about texting,
Mm,
microblogs and texting. And I was he didn't do that. It came from another app called TextMob that they basically took over. And the guy that made that, he came forward like, yeah, we did all this stuff. And it was about actually coordinating and doing um like protests and stuff. And then they just took it over.
mm,
But you have it where design justice, going back to the argument, we have basically this hero worship where, oh, it was top down. We had the person with the vision, and then they created it. They sat down and created it and all that stuff like that. It really was, no, it was actually people needed it from the bottom up, like this text mob thing. People were hacking things together, and it was for coordination. And the narrative, which is the argument that oftentimes the people who are participating in the work that needs to be get done in the activity, and they through need, they create something, the story gets usurped by this top down view of, oh, And so we have these stories of repeatedly in all these books I'm talking about, mutual aid, medieval guilds, design justice, that like million, even the consulting books that we review, and other ones. We have other ones, and you see this repeated theme of this wrestling of top down versus bottom up. And one of the aspects, you got the buy-in aspect of trying to bring the populace in, and then you have the this rewriting of history aspect of, oh yeah, it really was the smart person on top the whole time, repeatedly over and over. Yeah.
This is okay. So I don't know if I missed on design justice, or maybe I just went in. I can't remember the name, and I was just going with the flow with everything you were saying at the point in which you commented and analyzed that book, or maybe that was the one I missed, because this theme is actually. I have a conversation about this theme like pretty much every week with some of my friends, and it's really incredible how outrageous that really becomes. I mean, like, to me, like the biggest example, at least now, just most famous, most popular, is Elon Musk.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, to me, it's interesting how people still fall for that messiah thing.
Mm-hmm.
And but Elon I like because it's that example that it's perfect, because if you actually go to each one of his ventures and actually read how it really went down, it's amazing. Even like to the point, like I don't know if as far as Tesla, for example, he was an early investor, and in his push to try to get one of the co-founders out, and in his settlement, part of his settlement that he pushed for, like one of the lines in there was that he should be considered a co-founder, and
Mm-hmm.
he knew what he was doing. He was going to use that to keep this idea that he's like the genius founder, right, that builds all these businesses. But even PayPal, if you remember PayPal, in fact,
Yeah.
the part that it was Peter Thiel, actually, the one that people, as you would think of it right now, was more of Peter, because Thiel and Elon Musk, right, they came together, right? Well, it was
Mm-hmm.
actually his side of that venture that actually went on. Like, the part of Elon Musk actually was discarded shortly after, and he was anything. I don't know if you know all about this, but just to me, it's an
It's
excellent example of what you're talking about.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I have not read Elon Musk's new biography by Isaacson. Definitely have it on my list. Isaacson's an excellent biographer.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's on my list, and we will definitely get in and see. Isaacson did a really good job on um,
Is this an
Steve
authorized
Jobs.
biography? Is this something that he does sitting down with the guy, or?
He sits down with the guy and he gets them to understand that he's going to interview everybody that's ever met him.
Oh.
So it's like you can either, and he's famous. Isaacson's famous. He's
Okay.
basically a historian. So he
Okay.
oh, who am I thinking of? Uh the famous play Hamilton.
Yeah.
Remember that was all the rage? That's based on his book on Hamilton.
Well, wait.
That play was based on Isaacson's Hamilton book, as far as
Oh,
if I'm
I see what
correct.
you're saying.
Yes, right. Yeah, I mean, it's not like, no, he didn't like write a play. He did the history of Hamilton. Hamilton, his book is really, really good. But in any case, he did one on Steve Jobs. So people are like, oh, he did that one. You turn around and did Steve Jobs. Okay, the Steve Jobs is, it's how a biography should be written. And so when they're saying he's gonna go, I just seen an interview of him talking about the Elon Musk biography, and I'm like, oh, he's gonna pull everything out of
The
that.
one about Isaac Zahn's one on Steve Jobs, did you read that one?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And his Einstein one. I think it's his
Really?
Einstein one. Uh let me, because sometimes I get some of these authors mixed up. But that one will make you also change your views on Einstein. I mean, history's different than how, we do hero
Mm.
worship, and he's pretty good at trying. Yeah, Einstein. He did the Einstein.
You mean in the
Uh,
sense of Einstein's views on economic justice, perhaps?
oh no, like
Not even?
the how he came up with special relativity and general relativity. Like
Ah.
we think of special relativity, like oh, it's in a vacuum and all that. Mm-mm. Uh, Einstein, he had a hard time. He had to compete with some other uh Herbert Hilbert, if I remember correctly, a genius in math. And Einstein actually evidently is not a supreme genius in math. He
Mhm.
had a hard time. And Herbert Hilbert actually did the math before him. He just
Mm.
talked with him at a party. And he was like, oh, that seems like that might work. And he did it in like a couple days and published it, and then said on there, yeah, but this other guy gave me the idea, give the credit to him. So I mean, Einstein, like, he was working on it for years or something, and so he had to wrestle with all those. So you can kind of see some of this theme that we're talking about of, oh, we have to. There's a super genius and he can do everything or whatever, and
Mhm.
it's top down. No, they often, a lot of things are bottom up. Um, but yeah.
Yeah, I asked about Steve Jobs because he famously was not on board with the concept of an iPhone and kept killing the thing for a year plus.
Oh,
So
really?
Johnny Ive and a couple of more, finally convinced him to give it a go, but he was opposed to it.
Okay, no, that the Hamilton book is written by Ron Chernow. It's not by Isaacson. The thing that Isaacson's stuff was the Einstein. That was it. I had the Hamilton one as well, but I got confused. But yeah, he's done Leonardo da Vinci. He just did Elon Musk. Benjamin Franklin. That's probably why I was getting confused with
Mm.
him. That's a famous one. Einstein's famous. So as far as Isaacson, so he's like really, 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 really good. But the Hamilton is based on that other book, the Chernow book. But yeah, but yeah, a lot of this stuff you can kind of see, I don't really read biographies that often. But when a book has like 1 billion stars, then I'll just say, all right, I'll go through. So let's see here. Essentials of craft. So taking responsibility for all the elements of making buildings, landscapes, development and planning, design, building, furniture, woodwork, the interior aftercare gives us a chance to craft good buildings. So they're taking responsibility. Craftspeople take their time. You can't rush quality. It develops at its own pace. You can't rush the skills of craft, blah, blah, blah. Right. So you kind of got some of the stuff that we were talking about. Um, and then superior work results from creating a workplace that engenders, okay, now this is important, engenders the spirit of craft and makes it possible for us to fulfill the wishes for whom the work is done. So this is that environment for allowing the bottom up to happen. That's what this whole principle celebrating this the spirit of craft is about. Let's do this design build process. So let's come over here. Well-crafted projects, in our view, embody a collection of qualities. They're all artful, calm, comforting, light and airy, durable, flexible, easy to change, energy efficient, healthy to live in, made from low-impact materials, surprising, uplifting, and of course, satisfying to their clients, right? Our job as designers is to ask, listen, and suggest solutions. The client's job is to articulate needs, preferences, and desires. So that's the symbiotic relationship that allows for a bottom up. The ultimate result of good design process is a well-mixed blend, a combined expression of clients and designers. To be good at being a client requires being good at communicating how you feel in a house or landscape. To be good at being a designer requires good listening and asking skills and having good luck to see our way to good solutions.
Just to add to that, like as a designer, you have to, I mean, since you're usually, multidisciplinary, or at least usually your background is supposed to be multifaceted, right? You also need to be very good, especially as projects are more complex, in having that same relationship with other people, more technical people, like specialty people. You have to be that, which in a way it's what we envision a product manager being. Being a good articulator and orchestrator, right? So the designer needs to also attend the needs of other people that are bringing their expertise into the design, right? In my
Yeah.
mind, that's also super important,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's not only client and the designer, but the designer and the rest of a team.
Yeah. Yeah, that is funny enough. On the Steve Jobs, one of the things he wanted for all of the people on the team, he wanted them to have a broad background. So he developers, he wanted them to be artistic and be into other things,
Mm.
art, other things like that. So interesting that he wanted um, you know, kind of I don't want to say generic, a generalist background, but he wanted them to be
People with range.
exposed. Yeah, exposed to different things, range. Yep, that's a good book too. I just finished. Named Range. We deal forthrightly and early on with money. We talk about it from day one. It's an essential design constraint, and we must be able to discuss it as frankly and knowledgeably as site, space, aesthetics, energy, dormers, I don't know, and window seats. Hmm. Because we have responsibility for the building as well as the design and full set of construction skills and broad experience, we can more competently advise clients about costs as we design. Yeah, this is the author is always bringing us back to being practical and the constraints. And this is often a concern. You're talking with someone and they have sky's the limit, and then they're saying they bring it, you know, early on to money. They talk about it from day one. Whereas, in some spaces, I know I'm guilty of this. You kind of want to wait to the end.
Mhm.
It's like it's a difficult thing to wrestle with. You don't want to be a Debbie Downer or something. Oh, that's going to be expensive every time they say something, and then but then you don't say anything, and at the end, it's like, yeah, this is out of the budget for you for sure, but here it is. So let's start over from scratch and cut everything. I've always wrestled with that, but here they're saying just go ahead from early on and talk about it from day one.
Yeah, and I would say that designer, which is a word that it's so vague that everybody has a different interpretation. One of the things that industrial designers really, well, we have to battle with it, is when people use design as a way to designate someone that has or is involved, or their expertise or skill set is around aesthetics. It's like
Mm-hmm.
making things pretty and all that, or even if you say, oh well, usable, right? But in reality, and if you look at designers and traditional schools of design, there are people that are very well versed in material science, for example, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
people that are there not just thinking about aesthetic. In fact, in my 4 + 1 year degree, aesthetic was like this 1 hour class, right? The first year. And it's all about economics, about material science, about engineering. and to go along with other more in the I have to go to the architecture schools and the economic school, business school, and also the engineering school, because how are you going to be someone that articulates matter and solves problems for human beings if we don't know what are the materials that we're talking, even like IT. I did a lot of multimedia stuff, right? But that what really separates the designer is the ability to think about solving a problem around a human being with certain disciplines, right, to build that solution. That's all it is, right? So to me, the better, and I've worked with designers that I were like, no, hyper specialized in graphic design, right? Okay, fine, I guess that you're a designer, right? But the more you are going to design, the more you broaden and your ability to work with technical disciplines, and also in this sense the budget, right, the economic sense. Like even in my undergrad, I was budgeting designs, products. How is this going to turn out? To me, to be able to more to better understand when I talked to somebody that was actually going to be more involved in the manufacturing process, right? I was not going to be an industrial engineer, but I was going to be competent enough to be able to budget and be able to understand the different aspects that go into making a budget for a mass production, right? Anyway, so that's me as a designer claiming that, hey, we're more than, or we can be, it's fine. If you're hyper specialized, that's fine. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's really what design is aiming to be, or can be.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah. Have you ever heard of Christopher Alexander? He's
Christopher.
another. Yeah, yeah. He is, if you've ever heard of the patterns movement within software back in the 90s, and you may have heard, I don't know, as far as on development, how much you've ever heard, like model view controller was a, if you've ever heard of Ruby on Rails, maybe.
Yeah, Ruby on
Uh,
Rails. Yeah.
yeah, that it's based on the model view controller pattern, and that was kind of distilled by a guy named Martin Fowler, who got it from the Gang of Four, what we call a Gang of Four in software uh, architecture, and they got it from Christopher Alexander. So Christopher Alexander's pure architect, Harvard, wrote all these super influential books. And his thing is, it's again bottom up, and his whole thing was, he wrote, it's really one of my favorite books. It's a top 10 book for me, The Timeless Way of Building.
Timeless.
And
Okay.
yeah, Timeless Way of Building, and even the book itself is like architected. You could, if you go take a look, but he wrote in the follow-up is called A Pattern Language. And his argument is that you architects should make a language for the consumers. So the people who are going to live in the home, in the barn, in the building, in whatever, they have a way of communicating. You're really facilitating the communication of them with each other over, it can be over years or what have you, of how they want to really resolve what he calls patterns or events, resolve the conflicts of reoccurring actions in a space. That's what he calls a pattern. It's a bunch of actions in a space that can have, they can either be unresolved and they kind of have conflicts, these actions or what have you, or they can be resolved and the architecture, so the whatever is in that space, so let's say a barn or what have you, facilitates the action. So for instance, you could say a pattern would be, I have a car, I drive here, I get out the car and I walk into a house or whatever. Sometimes it rains, sometimes it doesn't rain, sometimes I'm looking out at the car, whatever. And he's like, okay, really something that facilitates that is a garage that's actually connected to the house or not, or what have you. And you're facilitating. The pattern is that you would see, oh, you'd start to see things that we call garages connected to homes. And but the events are really the pattern, and it's supposed to be built up from the bottom. So he's saying like, oh, barns in the countryside, there weren't really architects for those barns. They were made by the people who are using the barns. And the architect, if they want to help, they really facilitate the communication of the people creating the barn or what have you, right? Either they have it built for them or they built it. And that's really it. And he's saying that's really how architecture happens anyway. So that fits well with all these other bottom up things that we were talking about. So yeah, great, really, really, really good book. Very influential in software architecture.
Really?
Super, yeah. All like that word pattern. Now that I've said it, and you go look at pattern in software, it's everywhere. People arguing against it. Oh, this pattern, you're using that pattern in the wrong place. It was completely, totally mischaracterized in the early software architecture books and then reinterpreted again.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where no one read the original and they only read the interpretation and then everybody was
Yeah.
wrong. It's hilarious. So, but yeah, it's all over the place. There's lots of projects who were very much influenced by the architecture of buildings and trying and bringing that over the fundamental principles of a pattern and bringing it over into software.
Only when you said pattern and in software and all that, what came to mind is like what I've usually heard it used for is UX designers just talking about patterns, as in certain systems that are tried and true, and and even have raised to the collective expectation of a user, right? But it's obviously this different thing, right? It's much broader. In fact, I'm reading as you were talking, I was reading the Wikipedia page, and I read the first two paragraphs, and I'm like, nope, I'm still not sure of exact. Like, there's a part of me that is okay. This is familiar language as far as systems thinking and how a designer needs to understand the context in which a problem happens, manifest the the symptoms and the signs and the pain point, all that stuff, right? But
Mm-hmm.
I think this is different. It's also broader, so I'm gonna have to dig deeper here because it looks like it's pretty interesting. And if you're saying that it was highly influential in the 70s, 80s as software was emerging, so okay,
Yeah,
sounds like I need to read this.
yeah, he wrote this. I want to say, I don't know when he wrote this actually. I know that the developers picked it up. If you've heard of object oriented programming,
Mm,
the developers and software architects, so-called software architects, that picked it up in the 90s. So object-oriented programming was, had, they got small talk, you had other early languages, but they really, was picking up late 80s, early 90s. And then the patterns movement was a takeover of the object-oriented
mm,
movement. It was like everything can't be an object. They're reoccurring things, and you should facilitate those things. And that's where a lot of that movement was in mid '90s, all the way to the end of the '90s. Really, all the way through Ruby on Rails took one pattern and ran with it, and it made it just people were going back. That's an implementation, and you had Martin Fowler who really made everybody take another look at it, and another guy, Eric Evans. Um, there's some language that from some of this stuff that you probably have heard, even up at the higher level of the product side. I'm just drawing a blank on some of the things that have come out of the movement, either like symbiotically was developed or come out of the movement. But yeah,
Yeah, it seems he
yeah,
came
yeah,
up with this 1977.
yeah. It's a so this is old, and the developers didn't come across it until like late '80s, mid '90s. It started filtering its way in, and they started being super influential. Whenever I meet an architect, I ask them, have they heard of Christopher Alexander? And they're like, oh, yeah, kind of. And then they'll have another person that they like. Uh, but yeah, his books are, this book's not that expensive, but his newer books are ridiculously like $300 or something
Oh my
ridiculous.
God.
Yeah. It's like, come on, man. No one's going to read that. So, um, yeah, let's get through this chapter. We got practices. Let's come in here. So basically, they they again, the major theme, spirit of craft. They want their homes to kind of last. They wish they would last forever, but last for longer than normal. And they create kind of a user manual for their homes. The message of the owner's manual and roughing book is this: we expect the building to last a long time. We want to assure that it does. We expect it to change during its lifetime. We wish to make it easy to change, to make it last, and to make it easy to change. We have to make it easy to maintain. And we have to communicate to the people in the future who will work on it and live in it what it is and how it was made. Right. And we periodically survey past owners and take our medicine. What's wrong with and what's right about your house? What would you do differently? So on and so forth. So they're surveying things. So these are practices that they're saying that other home developers don't really do, because they really don't care about craftsmanship as much as they do, as evidence as they really don't have an owner's manual that to the extent of that they do, let's say. um the most important elusive lesson of practice of our crafts is that even with all our lofty goals and expectations, it turns out that our most successful projects are characterized by a sense of modesty. We are not wildly innovative, nor are we drawn to the highly dramatic. So, modest goals. That's that chapter. Let's go 10 minutes into this one. This chapter here, practicing community entrepreneurism, preserving the community. So, I'm going to give an overview of this chapter. So, the main thing here is it is a goal. It's one of their principles, right? So they're cooperative and they want to, part of their, want to say ethos is to do something that matters. And community entrepreneurism is going to be they want to have a lasting effect, positive effect on communities. And so entrepreneurism with community seems like a oxymoron. What is this going to be about? Profit motive? What is this? Well, they're saying um, we're doing things that are going to be innovative, solving problems in community through craftsmanship, some of the other things that we said. But how? Well, and what? What problems? One of the things that they tease out is the very difficult problem of um, community, like the haves and have nots, the people that migrate out of a community, low income housing, trying to have what they call perpetuity in a community, not pricing out families that were there 40 years ago and now they can't live there anymore. So that would be gentrification. They don't use that word.
Mhm.
But these types of things, I've talked with people about that try to plan this kind of thing, and like trying to have, okay, we'll have the low income housing here, we'll try to do this type of thing here. There's really bad ways to do it, and there's ways where they're trying to do it. They're really trying hard to preserve, I want to say, the community, the people that were always living there in some way. Like they, right? There's some where they're just like, hey, let's draw a circle around this area, and that's gonna be, we're gonna price them out eventually, but we're gonna do it in a way where we don't look bad. And then there's another way where they're trying really hard. This stuff that they have in here is novel to me. I haven't, I'm not a builder, so but I've not seen any of this stuff. And we did a book review on the Jackson Cooperative last year or the year before, where they were actually using cooperatives to combat gentrification in Jacksonville, Mississippi. That was one of their major goals. And it's really difficult. And they had their ways. None of this stuff in here was mentioned that I could see, but this is from someone who builds homes and what they're trying to do.
This is
So
probably connected to CLTs, right? To community land trust, and
yeah,
the movement around that.
yep, they have. What did they say? Community land trust. They definitely have trusts where the trusts are kind of owning.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see here. So, stable housing is an essential component of American dream. Today, however, staggering increases in real estate prices have made it impossible for many to afford homes. As housing prices soared, the community became endangered. All right. And this whole thing really should be bolded. A community consists of a place and those who have a relationship with that place, the land and the people. Land conservation is a familiar concept, but now we have to think about people conservation as well. Affordable housing is less about houses or land or developments and more about people who belong in a place being able to afford to stay in that place. So
Amen.
this, yeah, I look at this, it's not something that I would be able to articulate off the top of my head. And it's really a bold statement. This stable housing is an essential component of American dream. Seems like people hard to argue against that. Uh,
Well,
Staggering real
it's
estate
not
prices.
American, really. It's human being dream.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, and this staggering increases in real estate prices have made it impossible for many to afford homes. This is where you start to lose half of, the people who are like, well, if you work hard enough, you'll be fine. You know, that whole thing. Like, you don't deserve to live there if you can't afford it. This is where
Yeah.
you start losing people. This here, I think, is a different take. Community consists of a place, what have you, and you've got people, and you want to keep the same people. And there's another place where we're going to talk about relationships, what they say here. It's less about houses and land or development. It's more about the people who belong in a place being able to afford to stay in that place. Right?
Mm-hmm.
This part, those who have a relationship with that place, this is, I think, a fundamental premise to build an argument on for what they care about. Well, I care about, but what they care about, the author, and why it's not going to be solved by profit motive, right? So now you have an argument against, oh, markets will solve it. Markets are going to solve this, right? This is a place where markets break. If you want to preserve uh, the relationships in a space, so that needs to be, they tease it out in this chapter, but this is where I would want to go here before I would go this here for everyone who is already sold. They don't care because, yeah, of course. And the one who's not sold, this is like, oh, this is kind of what you deserve, because markets are supposed to solve the problem.
Yeah, that talks about affordability problem, but then the one on the right, I think, is more connected to even like human rights. The rights of the people of that live in an area to remain in that area, especially when they're the ones that look after the area, you know? And so, and
Mm-hmm.
which is like dangerously close to someone in the workplace, you know, actually the people that built the thing, that look after the thing, that depend on the thing to for their livelihood, they maybe should, you know, have the power and ownership over it.
Yeah.
Maybe, but that's a very dangerous idea, Watson.
Yeah. They try to, I mean, they're working hard in this chapter to try to do it. So let's
Mhm.
see here. The story of affordable housing is a story about long-term community preservation. Right. So this is, makes heads explode talking about this. Right. So South Mountain has been assembling small, affordable housing projects. It is a staple of our work. We believe it is one of the most important community services we can offer. High quality housing for the people who live there. Our high end work subsidizes this work that has so much meaning for us. So now we've got this is going to be triggering to some people, right?
Mhm.
And all of this stuff. Um, and so they had to, a big part of this whole entrepreneurism, I guess there's different definitions for entrepreneurism, but being an entrepreneur, one definition that I think is good is the resourceful person. So they're able to figure out how to compose resources to get new outputs better than the next person. They're either to find resources when they don't have them or compose resources, either one. And this is oh, you found a way to make the people who don't have any money or less money or what have you, how a way to keep them there. You did some type of resourcefulness with subsidizing. So, so let's go on to this one.
It also
We
depends
think
on
of
what do you think is the problem, right? Because if you think the problem is affordability, you're going to problem solve for that. And the solution is going to be very different than if you're like, wait a second, this is about rights, about, you know, and so the solution is so different, right? That's
mhm.
why coming from it from a lens of being in a very, you know, let's say a more traditional uh capital allocator that has used that, you're going
Mhm.
to solve problem solve differently that if you come from, I don't know, community rights activist, right? Completely different. And
Yeah,
you're both entrepreneurial, right? But
they bring a group, like we have the subsidies piece. They bring a group of people. I think some of them are going to be more that side, and some of them are like traditional banks, and then some of them are people who would donate, and then it's them who build things, right?
Mhm.
Uh, this is a really hard problem to solve. There's a book. Oh, I'm sorry. There is a I think it's 5 episode series made by the same guy who made The Wire.
No.
It's called Show Me a Hero, right? So Show Me a Hero, and the second, I guess I don't, I think it's a Shakespeare quote. I'm not sure, but it's like, and I'll write you a tragedy. I think it's the second side of that. I don't know where it comes from, but um, Show Me a Hero, and it is about the affordable housing initiative in Yonkers, I believe, in New York. This is after a bunch of failed affordable housing projects were all in main, like New York City, Bronx, Brooklyn, all that, where they're considered failed.
Mm.
Lots of like the things were not kept well, and all types of everything nightmarish,
Yeah.
which is reproduced all over. Well, I don't say all over, but plenty of places in the United States.
I was gonna say I know
Yeah,
about that in Chicago. I've heard you know,
Chicago,
yeah.
St. Louis, and yeah, yeah, the Chicago one is famous too, right? They took that, had all the same issues that they're talking about in this book, where people in this chapter, where people Or like, oh, affordable housing, not in my backyard. All this stuff. You have to wrestle with all of that. It's all encompassing. You have HUD, Herbing, home urban development, I want to say. That would they subsidize affordable housing? They come in and make rules. They say, hey, you gotta, they were there and there's money there, but the people are like, hey, well, you need to go ahead and build it over that place. People want to, because so there's a mandate. And so like, okay, yeah, build it, put it in a place where it does the least amount of damage, and we don't care. And then you have people like this who are trying to do it, that show me a hero in that series. He ended, this is a true series, it's not, it's a real mayor, all that stuff like that. And he ended up making it to where basically some of the things they're talking about in this book, it's kind of like more along those lines. It's like, oh, we want to develop a sense of ownership. So don't make it the 10, 20, 30 story buildings. Go ahead and make it duplexes. Go ahead and allow for people to have a a yard. Of course you're gonna have to filter for background checks and so what have you, all of that stuff. But people who are already in there, they can stay there. These types of things, and a bunch of other things. And you can't just have it out in the boondocks like some weird. It has to be not all lumped into 5,000 units, but maybe smaller units, and in the middle city, right, and spread out. And it worked. you know, there were places in Yonkers where they did it the other way, and it was a horrible disaster, same thing as everywhere else. These actually worked. This guy made it happen, but then of course, everybody's going after him, and that's the drama.
No, that's fantastic. And that same mistake has been replicated across Europe like, for many, decades. Not at this point, obviously, but I even lived through it back where I'm from. And that they just created like two pretty much ghettos in which they would just concentrate low income people, and it was a total mess. Only when they were uh, they were able to approach this in a way that aimed to not only see this as a problem of housing, affordable housing, but also a way to invest in the community, have social services. So right, so and in a way that it's also in a way that they could be spread out, but also with their own communities, not just like isolated them, right? And when that happened, those areas just disappeared. Like it was less than a decade that all of the stories, all of the huge issues of drugs and crime and all that, they just completely disappeared. Right.
Oh
and
wow.
and I got interested for a while. I'm like, dude, we already knew this. There's a bunch of studies and case studies out there that just concentrating people on this part of the city is just a bad idea.
Yeah, and so they all knew that. And the people that are living in a place that have their, oh, I have value in my home or whatever, they in the film and the series, they come through, and in this book they talk about, but they come through and say, hey, we don't want to do this, and we're going to elect you out as mayor if you don't do this. And then there's a judge who will say, in real life this happened, hey, we got a mandate, federal mandate, you all have to decide where to put this. And then the mayor and the city council are like, we're not deciding. They elected us to stop this, so we're not picking anywhere. You pick it, judge. And the judge says, well, I'm not going to pick it. You know what I'm going to do? You're going to prison, and you're going to stay in prison. Not only that, you're going to have a fine that hits you and doubles every day. And the
Right.
city's going to pay it. So the city's going to pay this fine. I'm not picking it. You're picking it. And the people in the city council, they just went to jail. They said, okay, we're gonna go to jail. Right. So it was a complete mess. And then they figured out, this guy that's the hero or whatever. He's like, oh, okay, let's go ahead and let's do this. But they have a person from HUD. So you have the person that's like the hippy dippy, I academic who has studied places in Europe. Evidently, I think there's a place in Denmark and there's other places like what you're talking about. And they're like, hey, over there, they did it. They made it happen. They made it work. Here's what you got to do. Right. And all the problem is all of the community, I say all the community, all the people who don't want their value, their homes to go down, they're not listening to an academic say anything. They're like, no, and we're gonna vote whoever it is that's gonna do what we're gonna say, we're voting them in.
That's the
And
NIMBY thing, right? Like not in my backyard. Now we're talking about same
yeah,
sentiment, right? Yeah.
yeah, not in my backyard. So this is the real fight. This is the fight that they're talking about in this book, that you have to deal with all of it, not just I got the great idea, I know how to make it look, just trust me and all that. The people are that they're like, no, we don't want low income housing. And so he is taking all of that holistically as what has to be done if you care about the subject. That is what he's saying is entrepreneurism. Um, so we if we go through here real quick, like part of the effort was comprehensive housing needs assessment funded by, and we were talking about these housing funds, needs assessment, particularly helpful with potential donors. Um, it's a design challenge. The island's residents have made remarkable progress. So this is like them saying, hey, we actually made it happen. Um, so let's go here. Let's see if we can get through this. Subsidies. In runaway real estate markets, affordable housing needs deep subsidies. What little can be done without subsidies produces shoddy housing, and communities find unacceptable, and occupants find to be distinctly unaffordable over time due to high maintenance and energy costs. Affordable housing should be smaller in many respects to luxury housing, except more. Oh, sorry, should be similar in many respects to luxury housing, except more compact, somewhat less detailed, and most important, differently financed. Historically, in the modern era, whenever we've been successful at housing our country's poor, and even in the middle class, it's been due to subsidies. The GI Bill after World War II was the greatest affordable housing subsidy ever. It helped families of our returning soldiers and partially fueled the post war economy, right? And then, of course, he talks about the mortgage interest deduction. He's saying that's a huge subsidy too. Um, so and he's saying, okay, this is trying to bring people together. Private land conservation groups have also been tremendously effective. As a community, we have actively and generously funded land conservation of roadsides, vistas, beaches, farmland, and ecologically significant habitats. At present, roughly 20% of the island's land area is under some form of permanent protection. That permanent protection is kind of the ethic there. So those are subsidies. Let's go down here to the development. So at South Mountain, our first development question is: are we proposing to invent something that the community needs? That, if we go back to the Jackson book, that whole thing of gentrification, that if you want to gentrify, let's put on a evil hat. If you want to gentrify an area, put in amenities and other things that the people in the area that live there currently do not want. It brings up the property value of that area. They can't afford it. Plus, the things that are put there, they don't care about. So they want to move. They're incentivized to sell because they can't afford the property tax. That's how you do it. And the thing about that book is it's very clear that the people that were wanting to gentrify the area because they want to take over, it's the capital of Mississippi, they want to develop it and they want to move people out that are living there. They were blatant about actively trying to gentrify the area. It wasn't like the property value just naturally is going up. No, they were trying to do it. That's why I really like that book, because it's black and white kind of thing, and them combating it. Uh, so let's see here. South Mountain was our first development question. Is already, yeah. Open space preserve. These were the principles. Open space open space preserved in perpetuity, restoration of agricultural land, places for low impact businesses that will not contribute to strip development, community systems for converting waste to nutrients to protect our sole source aquifer, and neighborhoods that encourage social interaction. So this is kind of like they're down and getting down to the nitty gritty of these are things that will make it to where you can keep the whole place in perpetuity and the people there in perpetuity, and so it doesn't get gentrified.
So pretty much the opposite of American, urban development.
Yeah,
Large
100%. Yep. And I mean, they take, so in this book they're not saying that people will do things, will try to gentrify an area on purpose. They don't say that. uh they're kind of taking, as far as I can see, the view and position that you have to be creative in finding and isolating things that will stop the gentrification. You have to make it a goal, and then you got to bring people together. They don't talk about federal or HUD money in here. They're talking about local money, and they actually say that the key is to get local funding to get it done. So it's like kind of like they're taking a no excuse uh, view on how you get this done, and it isn't get a bunch of money from federal. It's all local.
organizing.
Yeah, yeah. So here's what we're saying in Denmark. So using examples from other places, right? Let's get this, right? Uh the development, so in Denmark, is limited in size to 12 to 30 five homes, right? Automobiles are relegated to the perimeter, leaving pedestrian space. Houses are tightly clustered or attached to promote social contact. A common house is included where residents often share one or more meals a week. And not only community hub, but the common house provides space not needed on a daily basis, thereby allowing individual homes to be smaller. The residents are developers making decisions as a group, and the process creating community bonds. So the people that live there vote on it.
How much more likely do you think that those people involved in that dynamic would be open to working in a co-op?
Well, I mean, these guys are co-op, so I would think. I mean, they go on this here, I believe, is yeah.
In a sense that they're exercising that
Mhm.
muscle of connecting with others, making the understanding that there's a common good here, and that we are yeah, organizing, connecting, making decisions. And so I would think that somebody that has been exposed to that thinking and decision making will find it more I guess weird, being in a workplace in which everything is like very top down,
Oh,
right?
okay.
And
Yeah.
would absolutely see something as a co-op, as a, oh yeah, yeah, even where I live, we actually do a lot of that. So yeah, that makes sense. Why not? You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I got you. So you're saying in a place where it's jointly developed, would that lend itself to the person who's living there, or the people who live in there, when they actually go to work, they want where they work to be a co-op as well. So democratically made,
They'll
decision
definitely be
making
more
on that.
receptive to the idea, as opposed to when people have been, they only know being raised in a very individualistic, atomized way in their family, barely knowing neighbors, and
Hmm.
so organizing, interacting, making collective decisions, it's never really in the purview, so, but they're more likely, I guess, to just have a work life that looks like that, as opposed to, oh, actually I do a lot of this in my personal life in different ways, So, oh, the co-op idea all of a sudden is like, yeah, that makes sense. I guess that and people have those skills too, right? I think that when you organize, especially when you're community building, you are exercising, even if you're a super introvert, but your mindset is to try to understand where people are at, trying to communicate with them, trying to vie for whatever makes sense for everybody. You know what I mean? So if you haven't done that at all, it's so different that when you have, it's just so natural to just keep doing it, in other aspects of your life.
Yep. That I want to say Carol Pateman book, um, Participatory Democracy,
Yeah,
that
I
we
love that.
reviewed. I don't know if you were you around for that one? I don't know.
I don't think so.
Yeah, that one, that was this year. Uh that one goes through it. Part of it is reviewing, or they're making the argument for what it is that promotes participatory democracy, not vote for what she calls contemporary democracy, which is basically electoral.
Yeah.
Uh, Vote someone and walk away. Participatory is your multiple definitions in there, but there could be consensus making, there could be all kinds of other things, but you're participating in the decision, and you have some power in the final decision.
Mhm.
And and so they went through. So that book was written in the 70s. They went through and was surveying all kinds of um, the upbringing or environments of people where they successfully uh, decide to participate in democracies more. One of the big arguments within contemporary democracy is that people are purposefully like complacent. They do not want to engage in democracy. They do not want to participate. They want to vote. And the argument is that contemporary political scientists say, um, we've already figured out that they don't want to participate, so the electoral is the way to go. And they even have an argument that
Yeah, I
they
remember
actually,
this. Yeah, yeah.
okay, you
I
do,
was vocal during this session.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So that whole thing, then they were saying, oh, the biggest, the biggest takeaway from their review, which was back then, 70s, we need more data, but was actually working in a participatory democracy is the biggest um influence on someone wanting to participate in decision making in their environment. So
Yeah.
government and all this stuff. They talked about some they've talked about like the family unit. It's really a hierarchy. They called it authoritarianism.
Mhm.
They talked about cooperative um domiciles or what have you a bit. And it was like when they were measuring and doing surveys and stuff like that, the only thing that I remember was workplace. Like it had the big influence. And so it's like the opposite. Like if you have your workplace, you want that, then where you live, you might want to do it. Like you'll be like, oh yeah, I like to participate in democracy, so I want to do that. But I don't know if it was the opposite. I have to go back and look.
Yeah, it's all like how you ask people. If you ask people, you want to participate in democracy, that might sound like a burden. But in the labor movement, it meant something else, right? People were after, having a say in their workplaces and, having that battle. So they understood what it was. Is like they understood the impact, definitely the impact of not doing so. And there is always like especially last century with FDR, like in those years, even prior, right? The labor movement was full steam, right? So people absolutely were open to that idea, right? Of
Mm-hmm.
being more engaged in affairs that involve them. So yeah, that kind of slid away, and now there's some sort of resurgence. And I'm sure that all those people that are involved in these labor disputes, they've exercised that muscle, that consciousness as well. So in their minds, I mean, you can have a conversation with them about co-ops, and I'm sure they'll be like, "Oh yeah, well, I mean, maybe the word is it seems foreign. Oh yeah, the co-ops, like the kids, what the kids do in the uni, right?" But no, if you're talking about democracy, if you're talking about organizing, and oh yeah, that's pretty much what we're trying to do, right? Like in this strike, for example. So people will understand and will be like, oh yeah, and by the way, we actually got a great deal from the company, right? All the more those people are going to be like super activated, right, to be able to do something in their communities.
Yeah, and you brought up organizing. We had I don't know if you're around for the Jane McAlevey book on she has three different books. I went through all of them, but we reviewed just one. But she's like the union organizer, and uh she kind of distills the different types of organizing that happens within unions, and she has three different levels. Let's see if I can remember. One was at the high level. I'm forgetting the terms that she was using, but at the very high level there was um where it's basically like lawyers and what have you that come together, and it's really just law. And then you have the middle layer where style, where it's kind of electoral politics, where you say, oh, I'm going to vote for a union leader or what have you, and they're going to basically um negotiate for us. And then she has at the bottom layer where it's what she calls organizing, and that organizing, it's you have worker leaders, what she was calling, and basically it's participatory democracy. And when you go, it's interesting because on the front of the book she has this picture of the negotiations
Mm-hmm.
with the employer, and everybody's in there.
That's awesome.
Everybody's in. There is no, one of her main premises is you can't have employer, then union, then employee. It has to always be union and employer, not three, but two. And
Yeah.
she's saying that what happened is the power that was with the unions. What ended up happening is, in the most, in the United States, we always are saying that unions are corrupt and all this stuff. She takes this position that the way that the unions got usurped, got um, reduced in power and all of that, is that it turned into a separate entity than employees. And
Yeah.
so they were
A
easily,
bureaucracy.
yeah, bureaucracy, straight up corruption.
Yeah.
The employer, she has examples of the employer making unions, creating unions, and then
Controlled
basic,
opposition.
yes, yep, real examples of that. And then so she is big in the education unions
Mm-hmm.
and teachers unions in some of them, right? Because they're, again, there's both styles. And in the healthcare unions with the nurses unions, the ones that she does it this way, and she's big on strikes and all this organic power. The
Mm-hmm.
other ones, and they have higher wages, all this other stuff. People, it's very similar to what this author here is talking about. They actually, like, nurses actually care about um the healthcare of the patients, whereas the professional managers actually don't. They're trying to have as little nurses per group of patients as possible, and all this other stuff. Super, like, just paradoxical what you would think.
Yeah.
um and so it's all good, but the ones that aren't organic, they'll have less pay, they'll have a union, and they'll have less pay than the places that don't have a union. They'll have because the actual union is what you just said, like a controlled opposition. She uses a different name, but it's, of course, you can have mob influence. There's that side, but then there's just like the employer will go in behind closed doors, have a negotiation with the union leaders and all that, and they come out and it's like, hey, here's a contract, and everybody's there and like, what? That
Mhm.
doesn't look like something that we why did, and you're bound to it for the next 2 years or 5 years or whatever. So that's a it's really a way to hack the democratic process. When it's not participatory, you can be worse off, because it's I would say it's worse off because it looks legitimate. It looks like you negotiated, and so now you have less power to complain.
Mhm.
But yeah, um, let's go through this. So nearly half the houses were subsidized in two ways: light subsidies achieved by internal price structuring that lifted higher percentage to shared costs, and deep subsidies that from a combination of cash fundraising from private donors and discounted mortgage rates. So here, this thing, regulatory hurdles were tremendous, and the potential for delays and conflicts was real. It was risky and a difficult project. So this is all this one project. These people came through, and yeah, this broad partnership among our company, sympathetic bankers, flexible regulatory officials, and a group of dedicated people who shared a dream and wish to develop and live in this kind of neighborhood. So this one, they actually built their headquarters in this affordable housing as well. Um, so they got hired to conduct a land search, facilitate formation of group, develop design, and deliberate a neighborhood. Um, so let's see here. The first method kept price low for smaller houses. The second allowed for four of the houses to be sold to qualified buyers earning less than 80% of the median county income at a price they can afford. So this whole thing of pricing the homes and reducing them so that they can say, okay, this is what is an affordable house in this area, all this stuff. So, along with internal and external subsidies, there were four other significant cost control mechanisms: production, building methods, and customization control, carving off and selling several building lots to offset land costs, reducing rates for South Mountains design and construction services, and infrastructure sharing. Let's see here. Let's go to okay, so when they were going through and building this, the first level of a fight that they had to do is they had this is Martha's Vineyard and it's super expensive, right? So they're coming in here and they're trying to do this initiative of trying to have lower income housing and all this. And so they had all this regulations that are there that, oh no, you can't build that here, right? And so now they have to go through that zoning difficulties and all that stuff. So that's the first thing that would make a bunch, like traditionally, some people that are going to build the low income housing. It's not going to be these guys. It's going to be another group that's like, well, we're going to go ahead and get the federal judge to make you change all those regulations because we're not even going to deal with you. We're not going to work with you. Whatever. We're going to let the judge come through. We're not dealing with it, right? And we're just going to get paid from the federal payment. We're going to build these high rises, and that's it. These guys come in here and they're like, oh, we have to work with them. We have to go in there. Basically, they're going to tell us that we've lost our minds or whatever. Well, they're like, no, we're going to have these really good proposals and we're going to try to win them over. That's, you know, normally people give up before that even happens, right?
Mm.
So they ended up winning. So here's another group. These two people, they said, oh, what we want to do is we're going to donate what we have and we're going to try to make it affordable housing. We have this lot. I'm like, okay, we're going to go through same thing. We got to go through and get it approved for and all that. Now, remember, they already had the victory from that last group of 24 homes or whatever. So they went in there. The land would ultimately be owned by the Island Trust Housing Trust, Community Land Trust, like what you said, CLT, I think you said. We
Yeah.
had spun off from the Island Affordable Housing Fund in 2001. Okay, so they're cooking, right? At the first planning board hearing, it was clear that we had misjudged the political landscape, that expecting the process to be a cakewalk because they already succeeded on the one and they built this thing that everybody was happy with and it was great and all that. And they didn't even take, as far as I can tell, They didn't take federal money. It was all local, all that, right? And so they walk in. There was two groups that they had to go through this time. The first group was like absolutely not and complaining and just tearing them apart. Um, and so they went in there thinking, we, walk on water. We build nice things that you want regardless. And they don't have this in here, but I bet they were like, hey, you're gonna have to do some affordable housing, federal rules and all that. Like they probably weren't saying that, but they probably have that in the back of their mind. Like we work miracles. And they went in there and they're like, nope, not in our backyard, like what you're saying earlier. So um uh so let's see here. Our affordable housing projects are mostly self-generated. We identify needs and create projects proactively as community entrepreneurs. Over time, our focus has expanded from buildings and technology to community planning efforts on our small island. We're finding that the need to create new hopeful stories is compelling, and that rewards for doing so are great, and that the potential to make progress with affordable housing and preserve community is within reach. So they got it through, but there was significant pushback. And then this whole thing of where it says the need to create new hopeful stories is compelling. That whole thing, when you come in, there's a partner, I didn't get it from the book, but basically they had to go and get these people who were the initial wanted to do the project. They had to come in there, get them to testify and say, hey, we're not in here to try to make money. We're not in here to destroy your to reduce the value of your homes or any of that stuff. We really just want to make this affordable housing. This is the best way to do it. And then they conceded, right? So it was a fight, right? So this house moves. Yeah. Basically, this was another initiative. They have people basically, the lot is starting to be worth more than the house. And they, instead of destroying the house, they go ahead and move the house somewhere else. And that's super expensive, all this stuff. They ended up making it happen. They said, oh, okay, what you're going to do is you're going to donate to a nonprofit. The amount of money that you're going to that you'll save on your taxes, we'll go ahead and you also give that to us as a donation, and we'll use that to move the house. And people, they made it work. This is entrepreneurship, basically, being resourceful.
Mhm.
uh so you have that, and let's go ahead and let's see if we can get through this. um let's just go through here. Supporting our housing efforts requires significant funding. This has moved over time from small private funding efforts to an array of sources, right? The annual island affordable housing fund event in early years was called Houses on the Move, which architectures, they basically, people, they brought a bunch of people together to build some things and they showed it off and then they sold it. um so this successful community entrepreneurialism uh, gives towns and regulatory agencies confidence to take larger steps. This is driving me crazy. Is this word entrepreneurialism? That's one, and then he's a different word here, entrepreneurism.
Hmm.
So that's irritating. Um, so zoning incentives. This is the game here where you're trying to bring everybody in. You can have we're going to force you to do it, and it's really the stick from the federal side, or you can do it you could say in right way, the right way in quotes, like their way or the Denmark way or what have you. And you're going to have to, everybody's going to, you either going to be forced and you're going to have the eyesore, or hey bank, go ahead and give us a loan and give us the discount rate. Hey, you over there, you want to donate? You live here, you're going to donate business, you want to donate here, or you're going to have an eyesore. What are you going to do? Now they didn't say it that way. They just they you know, that's how I understand it. But they went through and said, hey, we have a better way. And hey, who do you want to have building this stuff out? Do you want to have us who we're like we make we're craftsmen and we make things that are nice? Or do you want to have the outside builders that are going to come through and run roughshod through your neighborhood and reduce the value? Right, that all of that. They don't say that carrot and stick in here. That's how I'm understanding it, because they would have Martha's Vineyard is like a super expensive place. I don't know how really expensive places get away from the the mandate of affordable homes. And it seems like sometimes they can't, and that's when they get punished. And it's a trap because it basically, they just basically, well, we're going to section off that part of the city and it's not going to happen, or it's just going to be eyesore. We don't care. Um, so we, I mean, we've been on here for almost 2 hours. Let's go through this. Let's save the rest of this for the next one, and
Okay.
we'll try to finish off the book at that point. What do you have? Is there anything that you final comments?
Mm, no, it's I mean, it's surprising because I don't know about many of those particular examples. At the same time, it's predictable almost, right? Like it's same forces at play and similar ways to get through obstacles, involving people, meeting people where they are, not imposing, but involving others, you know. Like to me, it's a intuitively, it's a better way to go about things, mm, as opposed to having everything be a battle or trying to coerce people into submission, right? Um, yeah, and the more we use this approach in facets of our life, I think the more innovative and I think like the better we'll be off. I think it's a general lofty um, it's not even ideal. It's really reality. It's just looking at all these examples and others that I know of and understanding that it's absolutely possible to get along with people and actually be able to make decisions collectively that are good for everybody, right? Um, it seems like it's at the moment you put yourself on a different almost class, right? In the sense that I think I know better than you, or um, I was here already, or all of these things is when there is more strife, right? Um, yeah, even like personally speaking, right? It's like my mindset 10 years ago, the way I went about things, not necessarily it was very, I guess, self-centered in the sense of understanding it just as a reaction, not as a desire, as a, okay, well, I guess that everybody's it's try their best to just like climb or whatever, right? And with that reality and mindset, you react to that and kind of fit in with the tools that environment or dynamic seems to suggest are better, right? But when you start getting involved in other types of dynamics, when you organize in the community, or when you understand really the impacts, the unintended consequences and externalities of a lot of the business decisions that are made, how there's definitely a stratification in the workplace quality and involvement and just compensation across professions and firms. They are like, oh crap, it's I don't know. To me, it changes my outlook and it makes me want to involve myself in aspects of my life in a way that is more conducive to that collective bargaining and ability to co-create and yeah, as opposed to trying to move up and so I can have power to make my bidding, right? No, that's just as a reflection.
Yeah. Yeah. And with that, I will stop.